But thank you, Carrie, and thank you especially for bragging on my daughter Holly. It's, way more gratifying than hearing about me. But you did say there would be payback. So some of you may not know this, but today is CBW Carrie Baker Wells' birthday. And I won't tell you which milestone it is. Let's just say it's a big milestone. And so if you haven't had a chance to wish her happy birthday, I was going to ask Richard to do a solo and sing happy birthday. I think just a pat on the back and a hug will do well for celebrating today. It is great to be here in San Antonio. So many close friends here, but also because San Antonio is really at the forefront of the progress we're making in higher education in Texas. And before I start, I do want to recognize we do have a couple of staff members here with the coordinating board. Don Chavez, who's our Director of External Elections. Don, where are you? Okay, are you operating the clicker? Okay, so I'm just not. And then David Gardner, our Deputy Commissioner, who's been with the coordinating board, is sitting right over here. David is our Chief Academic Officer. So he knows about all things academic when it comes to our programs and facilities planning. Anybody else from staff here? Oh, and Linda Battles, who's the Associate Commissioner for External Relations and the best known person in the legislature representing our agency, even more than the Commissioner. So, and you can see one. This presentation is about the importance of aligning higher education with our workforce needs. And those of you in this audience understand that because you own or manage and run businesses. San Antonio's commitment, as I said earlier, has really served as a model to the communities in our state. This community was the first to embrace Generation Texas and understand that campaign's potential for encouraging a career in college-ready culture. San Antonio institutions, A&M San Antonio and Alamo colleges, were among the first in the state to embrace the governor's challenge to create a $10,000 degree, and has successfully launched one that actually costs a little less than $10,000 in the field of cybersecurity. And UTSA has set forth on a path to national research prominence as one of the state's emerging research institutions and an example of excellence in our state. So these are just a few of the examples of how San Antonio, this community and your institutions, have made a big difference and a big impact on Texas higher education. The most exciting thing to our board is the fact that when you look at San Antonio, the commitment to higher education is the entire community's engagement. From the city and Mayor Costler and Rebecca, who is here with the city on behalf of higher education, to our institutional leaders here in San Antonio, and most of all to the business community. All of you are engaged in moving the ball down the field on higher education. San Antonio, like Texas, has made tremendous progress since we launched Closing the Gaps 12 years ago. But like Texas, while we can celebrate significant gains, we need to recognize the challenge that lays before us and how much more work we have to accomplish together in the years to come. As you know, we launched Closing the Gaps in 2000. This chart shows you the progress we've made in enrollments. We have increased enrollments since 2000 by 53% overall. Hispanic enrollment is up 126%, and African American enrollment is up 94%. In this last year, though, a little bit of a red flag this last year, this is the most recent estimate through the fall of 2012. Our official final numbers will be available next week, so y'all are some of the first to see the numbers on statewide participation and success. We're just under 545,000 students increased in enrollment. The goal is to add 630,000, but in this last year, growth began to flatten. We only added a little over 12,000 students compared to the previous 3 years, where over the course of 3 years, we added around 200,000 and change. So you can see that the pace has changed, and we need to keep that curve bent upward on the trend line in order to hit our goal for 2015. This is the progress that San Antonio has made. It's even faster than the overall statewide progress. Enrollment in San Antonio's public universities has increased 83%. And these are 2011 figures. We'll have disaggregated numbers for 12 next week. 83% from 2000 to 2011, going from just shy of 19,000 to over 34,500 students, and a 59% increase in community college and technical college enrollment from 66,000 to almost 106,000, nearly 40,000 increase. But one of our challenges is still, both in Texas and in San Antonio, is African American male enrollment and Hispanic enrollment. We've got to see a gender gap, and this is true of all ethnic cohorts, frankly. Female students are enrolling in much higher numbers than their male counterparts across ethnic groups, but it's most pronounced in the African American community. In fact, the highest enrollment is by African American females at 8.3% of the population. So the gender gap is part of the trend we need to pay attention to, but also Hispanic enrollment. We have more than double Hispanic enrollment. The challenge is we're pursuing arithmetic solutions to a geometric challenge. First of all, we've got to get the rate of enrollment up, the percentage of the population. And secondly, as everyone knows, our Hispanic population is by far the fastest growing sector in Texas. And so we're improving, we're getting better. We just have to get better faster, if you will. Now, the success, here's the good news. These numbers are also just hot off the presses. If you have seen this, we have really turned the curve upward on the number of completions in Texas. Over 208,000, to less than 2,000 away from our 2015 goal for total awards for bachelor's, associates, and certificates. So in that regard, we as a state are doing well. Now here's how San Antonio has done locally in terms of completions. Once again, while the state has improved completions over 80%, San Antonio has actually done a little better, 94%. Through last year, through last May of 11, on your public university graduations, and 164% increase in community colleges and technical colleges in this area. So that's a remarkable achievement. But when we talk about closing the gaps, and I'll get into this in a few moments, you have to remember that our goal in 2000 was just to bring Texas to parity. It was just about becoming average, to put it another way. Try to meet the national average like states like Illinois and California and New York and Florida had. So it's already time to begin looking ahead to 2030 and how Texas can become not just a national leader among the states, but an internationally competitive economy and education dynamo. Two more critical areas, STEM degrees. We bottomed out in 2007. This is probably the one area we're furthest behind as a state. As you can see, though, we jumped 35% since that low water mark in 2007, but we're still 12,000 shy in terms of science, technology, engineering, and math degrees on an annual basis when it comes to our goal in 2015. So we need to bump this number up. 3,000 STEM degrees per year, an additional 3,000 per year in each of the last 4 years, closing the gaps. Let's talk about how together we can improve higher education outcomes, better align with workforce demands. By the way, in the blue notebooks, I think you've got the same presentation as well as some other background information at your chairs. So as I said, we've made great strides, and our communities, our institutions, the legislature and the governors deserve great recognition for what we've accomplished. But we're a long way from that position of national leadership that I talked about. And we've got to improve the outcomes of higher education and make sure that they align with the needs of our 21st century workforce. So why is this important? I think this graph speaks for itself. And many of you have already seen this in publications over the course of the recession. We've been through some tough era. But even given the challenges the college graduates have now in the workforce, you can see they do much better than their counterparts who do not have post-secondary completion. College graduates' unemployment rate is only 4.2, and even among young college graduates, while it's high at 14.5%, some of you may be housing some of these young college graduates. Look at the numbers for young high school graduates in the same youngest cohort, or even worse for those folks who don't have a high school diploma. It's striking, and it really shows us, even with the headwinds of the recession, how important this attainment is. We've looked at a lot of research from Georgetown University about what our workforce will look like at the end of this decade. In 1973, as you can see from this pie chart, only 28% of all jobs in this country required some level of post-secondary attainment. I'm not talking about bachelor's, I'm talking about any level of post-secondary, even just college graduate courses. By 2020, the national expectation, the national projection is that 65%, just about 2 out of every 3 jobs, will require some level of post-secondary attainment. In Texas, we're one of the few states that counts certificates. Certificates earned at community colleges and technical colleges, as well as associates and bachelor's degrees, as successful completions and important for our workforce. And those certificates are included in that green pie, part of the pie that you see. So 47% will need an associate's or higher, 18% will need either a certificate or some post-secondary training. In that 47%, again, the Higher Education Coordinating Board, we recognize that not every student needs a bachelor's degree. Roughly speaking, about 30%, maybe when you include master's and graduate degrees, 33% or so will be at that level. But the remainder of that slice are the associate degree graduates that we need, and then, as I said, the 18% certificates and other technical training. Texas projection is 59%, but as Woody Hunt said at the Texas Business Leadership Council recently, is that what we want it to look like? Or is that, because we're maintaining a much higher share of low-wage jobs than other states around the country. So I don't know that we need to set our goal at only hitting 59%. It may be with a more vertically integrated economy and workforce, our target should be on achieving that 65% and looking more like the nation. Now here's what we need to be concerned about. The trend in the United States and in Texas for our youngest cohort, the 25 and 34-year-olds, is not good. The orange bar represents that youngest group. As you can see, when we compare ourselves to the 5 highest performing countries to the left, Korea, Japan, Canada, Ireland, Norway, their trend, for the most part, is their youngest cohort is achieving a higher rate of attainment in post-secondary education. On the other hand, the U.S. has slipped to 42%, and in Texas it's even worse. We're just slightly under 32% among our youngest cohort, and we're growing faster than any other state in the country. So we've got a double challenge. We show Mexico on this chart to illustrate the point. Mexico is improving their youngest cohort. If we don't change this trend, our numbers will begin to mirror Mexico's. And in fact, if they continue their trend, you can project what the results may well be. So this is what we've got to work together, because this is the cohort that for the next 3 decades are going to make up our workforce. So during the coming session, the 83rd session, we want to explore together with you new strategies and initiatives that will improve productivity and efficiency without sacrificing quality. We want to establish what we believe will be a policy framework for becoming a national leader and a global competitor by 2030. In the near term, these are the key strategies and initiatives that we are reaching out to organizations like the Greater Austin, San Antonio Chamber, and others to get behind and support their local delegation. Some of these require legislation, some don't, but they're all making a difference. And I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, there is no one silver bullet to how do we lift Texas up to national leadership in higher education. It's all about the blending and the the complement that these strategies are to one another. So restructuring financial aid. Here we are making some proposals, and some of these may well be controversial in the session to come. But if we don't do anything to restructure how the Texas grant, our largest program in higher education, is allocated and awarded, we'll only be able to give a Texas grant to 18% of newly qualified needy students, first-time needy students, because renewals will soak up almost all the Texas grant. Now, since 2000, Texas has, even despite the cuts of the last session, Texas has greatly increased student financial aid dollars. But as I said, what we've got is a geometric challenge with the growth of our population and the growth of our poorest students. 60% of all students entering higher education come from poor families. So we've got to bear that in mind on how we continue to have great access as well as great success. So we're going to recommend that we stretch the Texas grant to cover academic costs only and to be spread out by taking the Pell Grant into account in order to, under our proposal, be able to provide a Texas grant to 95% of needy, qualified students. And that's still students at an estimated family contribution of $4,000 less. Yes, it will reduce the amount of the grant per student, but research shows that getting students sufficient aid early in their career when they're first starting has the most impact. So we've got to choose between what's going to be most effective and what would be ideal. And if in an ideal world, we would have full funding for all needy students for financial aid. But in a realistic world, our goal is to try to stretch that financial aid dollar to as many deserving students as possible. Secondly, low-cost degrees. When the governor issued this challenge at the beginning of the 2011 session, let's just say he was met with a little skepticism. I was on the floor of the House the day he gave the State of the State speech, and I had at least 2 House members and I think 3 chancellors come up to go, you know, how are we going to do that? How's that going to happen? A year and a half later, we literally have a competition among institutions. And it's important to remember and recognize this was never intended to be a one-size-fits-all solution for every institution. But it is another path, another tool for students who cannot afford to earn their way to a bachelor's degree without this kind of offering. And these degrees are proving to be workforce critical. They're not, you know, underwater basket weaving. They're degrees, whether in the energy field at UT Permian Basin or in cybersecurity here with A&M San Antonio and Alamo. They're degrees that are needed and employable. Institutionalizing a lean culture of continuous improvement. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit, but to put it in a nutshell, you cannot define solutions from the top and then try to shove them down the throats of our institutions. You have to have a cultural change among our institutions to embrace how they can become more productive and to continually improve. It's a journey. It's not something you do in 1 year. It's a journey, and they need to get on that journey, but it has to come from within our institutions, the sincere desire to make those improvements. Maybe I won't come back to it. I talked a lot about it. And strengthening community colleges. As key as anything to continuing to expand access. 70% of new students are entering higher education through our community colleges. We must improve the transfer process with clear pathways, with statewide articulation agreements that we are in the process of voluntarily accomplishing. Mechanical engineering was the first, but it's expanding to other engineering fields, to chemistry, to nursing, business, liberal arts are not too far down the road. When you have individual articulation agreements between our community colleges and our universities, and there are literally hundreds of them around the state, you have no articulation. You have a black box that our students and their parents have to figure out how to navigate, and that's got to stop. It's got to be a clear pathway. A community college student from Alamo who wants to get a bachelor's in mechanical engineering should be able to transfer to any institution in the state and know that their credits will transfer. The admission requirements may differ, but if they meet those admission requirements, then they ought to know what the heck it is they need to register for when they get there, and that their credits will count. Sustaining collaboration with P12. We've worked hard over the last 4 years to develop the college and career readiness standards that are now embedded in our curriculum through the hard work of vertically integrated teams of both higher education faculty members and public education faculty members. These are now embedded in the STAR. If you want to pick your top controversy for the coming legislative session, it's going to be school accountability. Don't think that comes as a surprise to you. Now is not the time to roll back accountability. Now's the time to work hard to make it work, make it reasonable. We don't need to teach any tests. We need to teach a curriculum that results in an end-of-course exam that tests what they learn during the school year. That's the concept behind the current accountability system in the STAR. And if it's not quite fixed yet, let's fix it. Let's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The professional development for teachers. The number one thing, studying OEC data, the number one thing that makes a difference in public education is an effective teacher in the classroom. It's not class size. It's probably not even the curriculum, though the core curriculum has benefits. It's the effectiveness of that teacher. So it's a circular pipeline. Higher education is responsible for delivering effective, well-trained teachers to our public education school districts. And we've got to find a way to provide meaningful professional development to teachers once they're in the workforce and to keep them growing on a good career path. And lastly, improving higher education outcomes. Two keys here. Developmental education, as we've noted in the past, is broken. Students who enter a semester-long developmental education course have less of a chance of graduating with any kind of college degree than students that don't take developmental. We have proven over the past 2 biennium through pilot programs that there are about 5, 6 key best practices, and this fall we're going to begin to scale those up. This is an area that's critical that our community colleges, who carry by far the heavy load on developmental education, get the resources they need to completely change this, to combine reading and writing into a single course, which sounds like common sense, but it's not done. To embed, for those students who only need to get a concept or two, to embed that developmental learning into a credit-bearing course or to deliver it outside of a credit-bearing course so they can immediately begin earning credits. Math importance that Texas State has piloted at over 11 community colleges. There are techniques that work, and it's time to engage those and fix both developmental ed and adult basic ed. And lastly, and perhaps most significantly, is outcomes-based funding for institutions. The concept is simple. We pursued this concept in the last 2 sessions. This session, what we have is a proposal that was developed with a great deal of consensus from both our universities and our community colleges. The concept is simply this: allocate 10% of the formula funding that our institutions receive based on 7 defined metrics, 7 metrics that were developed by our representatives of all of our university systems. Most importantly, make sure that the student outcomes are aligned with critical workforce needs. The proposal for community colleges is very similar, but the metrics recognize the difference in the mission of our community colleges. Again, a 10% allocation based on outcomes, and the outcomes are student success points, as opposed to pure results of the set of metrics that the university mission represents. This is the milestones that we want a student to achieve, because our community colleges will be rewarded for getting that student to each milestone that has proven through research to equate to persistence to ultimately earn a degree. And again, a heavier weighting, just like the universities, is going to go to critical workforce fields like STEM or nursing, etc. Lastly, the coordinating board is the agency in Texas responsible for maintaining the database on higher education and, more importantly, the performance accountability system. How are we as a state doing? How are our institutions doing? We've recently published 2012, it's our 2nd annual Texas Higher Education Almanac. These are out there in the lobby. We've got, I think, about 200 copies, so please take one. In that almanac is a resume or report card, if you will, 2 pages describing how every institution in Texas is performing, what their costs are, what their graduation rates are, research dollars, etc. So right there in simple format is a publication for parents and the public, for the press and policymakers, and for, of course, students to look and see how are our community's institutions doing, how's the state doing, how is the college that my son or daughter is considering doing. With that, I will close and be happy to answer any questions.